Greetings, ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to the review of this thing, the AMX M4 MLE 45 French Tier 7 heavy tank. So just a little bit of context for you here. Historically, of course, the French indigenous tank production stopped for much of the Second World War due to there being Germans occupying the country. And so what you find is that the designs in this game tend to be either very pre-war or very post-war. Just to give you an example of what I mean, you have, for instance, down here, the Shah B1, which was in service during the early part of the Second World War. You have the BDR G1B, which was a proposed heavy tank that was never actually put into service, but it was proposed and put forward in 1938, so before the war. And then you suddenly jump to the ARL 44, which is a vehicle designed in 1944, hence the name. And it's unusual to have a vehicle designed that late in the war to be at such a low tier, at tier 6, and then you get up here to the AMX M4 45 and you're looking at a vehicle from 1945. And the AMX 50s that come after, these are post-war designs. So what you have here is a tank that was heavily influenced by German tank designs of the Second World War, and so this thing was kind of influenced by the Tiger and the King Tiger, and you can see some similarities there. And this is in common with a lot of post-war French tanks. They tended to take quite a lot of design ideas, if you will, from German World War II designs. And this is also why in a number of the French vehicles in the higher tiers, they get access to what would appear at first glance to be German engines, Maybach engines, which are renowned for being, well, German. And so this thing is a tank designed in 1945, but in-game it's tiered at tier 7 with other tanks that were designed much earlier on. So at the same tier you have tanks like the Tiger, you've got the Panther, the Black Prince, and the IS and tanks like that. So that's where this tank fits in historically. Where does this tank fit into in the game itself? So a lot of people, when they talk to you or when you talk to them about the AMX M4 45, they'll tell you that it's more of a medium heavy tank. It's a mobile heavy tank, and they go on about this. And hopefully what I'm going to get across to you over the course of this review is that that's part true and part less true. So let's just see what we've got here. French heavy tank, hit points 1200, fully upgraded. This should ring an immediate warning light because there are medium tanks at this tier in the game that have more hit points than that. The Panther, I believe, has around 1200, and certainly the Chiri has I think it's just over 1200, but at least 1200. But it's a 55-ton tank. So it's not a complete lightweight. It has a decent engine, 850 horsepower, and what this means is that for a heavy tank, this tank has a pretty good power to weight ratio, so you accelerate fairly well. And the speed limit of 35 kilometers an hour is good for a heavy tank, but it is not outstanding. Please bear in mind that, this is not really any better than tanks like the IS. In fact, if we compare it, I have the IS-2, which has a speed limit of 37 kilometers an hour. This is the Chinese tier 7 heavy tank. You can look at the T29, speed limit of 35. That's exactly the same. So what you're actually getting with the French tank is a tank with decent engine power, but, a speed limit that's not spectacular. It's alright. So when people refer to this as a mobile heavy tank, more of a medium heavy hybrid, you have to take that with a little bit of a pinch of salt. This is not going to go like a bat out of hell, and you will not confuse this for a medium tank. It's not really fast enough. Traverse speed 24, nothing particularly special. Turret traverse speed 30 degrees per second. That's not bad for a heavy tank, but you know, let's not dwell on it too much. The armour I'm going to come back to in greater detail later, but just looking at the raw numbers, the armour doesn't look fantastic. If you look at the hull, 40 on the rear, 40 on the sides, 90 on the front, which is worse than the Tiger, and that has pretty bad armour. There is a bit of sloping going on there, however. On the turret, 40 on the rear, 70 on the sides, 100 on the front. Bit of rounding going on, but as I say, I'm going to talk about the armour in greater detail later on. View range 360 meters, which is not too shabby, and a 750 meter signal range, which is good, but radio's never really excited anybody in this game. So, what else have we got to talk about? Well, we should probably mention at some point the gun. Right, this tank gets a choice of 4 guns, but if you have any common sense, you will never have to use one of them, for reasons that I will get onto. So, here we go. Let's start off with the DCA-30. This is the top gun from the BDR G1B. And while it was a good gun at tier 5 on the BDR, you do not want to be using this on a tier 7 machine if you can possibly avoid it. And you can possibly avoid it because you will have unlocked all of the other guns at tier 6 on the ARL 44. So, you will never, if you have any common sense at all, you will never, ever, ever have to play this with the stock gun. You will always have one of the others. So, now let's talk about the next 3 guns. All of these you will have unlocked on the ARL 44, or you can have unlocked on the ARL 44, but I'm going to start off only talking about 2 of them. These first 2, because this DCA 45 gun, while you will have it unlocked, you can't mount it without the top turret. So let's just ignore that for now, and we're down to these 2 guns. So, we've got 90mm F3 and 105mm 13 TR. And which gun you want to use to grind out some of the modules on this tank is kind of a matter of opinion. I used the 105, although I did at points regret that and thought maybe I should be using the F3. The F3 is the short 90mm, the 105 is the 105mm. So what you get is, if you compare the 2, the 90 has a 7.5 rate of fire, so the 90mm has the better rate of fire. It also has the better penetration with AP and APCR ammunition, although, and it has 240 alpha damage, whereas the 105mm has 300 alpha and 330 with premium ammunition. Also, it's a larger caliber gun, so it gets better high explosive rounds, but this is where the 90mm gun really kind of shines in comparison. Better accuracy, or dispersion at 100 meters, and a better aim time, which is quite nice. But you're only ever going to use one of these guns to grind out modules on the tank with. The gun that you really want to use is the top gun, the DCA-45. This is the long 90mm that you had on the ARL-44, but on this tank it has received a couple of fairly significant buffs. So, rate of fire of 6.98. This has the worst DPM of the 3 guns I just mentioned. Bear that in mind. Penetration, 212 with armor piercing. Yes, 212. That means that this has the highest penetration of any tier 7 heavy tank. In fact, if you want to fold in the tier 7 tank destroyers, that's a very respectable number. I think it puts it something like 2nd or something. Maybe 3rd, or penetration-wise. So that's pretty good. The premium ammunition, that goes up to 259, basically 260. So you can carry some rounds if you want, but with 212 penetration on the AP rounds, I never really felt the need to load any premium ammunition. 240 alpha damage, and 45 pen and 320 alpha damage with the high explosive ammo. Dispersion 0.36, which is not terrible, but it's not fantastic. 2.9 second aiming time, which is a bit naff. On paper, this gun doesn't look too bad. However, it does have a couple of flaws. 1, the low DPM. 2, the accuracy is not brilliant, which combined with a kind of dodgy aim time means that taking snapshots in this thing is a bit dubious. You do have to be very careful. And in practice, in my opinion, this gun is not actually very good. But I can't, in all honesty, tell you to use one of the others. But that's just in my experience. You know, on paper this gun looks okay. I just don't think it's as good in practice. Let's take a quick look at the grind. So here we are, the French heavy tank line. You start off in a light tank, the D1. It has a terrible gun, it has respectable armour for a tier 2, you won't have to spend much time in it, move on. D2 at tier 3, this is one of only 3 medium tanks, French medium tanks in the game at the moment. It has decent armour, bad gun, bad engine power, and it hates tier 5 games. Then you get to the B1 at tier 4, which is a tier 4 heavy tank, and all the tier 4 heavy tanks, or both of them, there are only 2 that aren't premium tanks, are kind of rubbish. You get respectable armour, respectable mobility, with a terrible gun. Tier 5 is really where things start kicking off. BDR G1B is the tier 5 heavy tank with the highest alpha damage. It's the king of peekaboo. The armour isn't great, the mobility is alright but not fantastic. Now I wasn't actually a huge fan of this tank when I played it, but you know, I might enjoy it more if I played it now, and I know a lot of people do like this. So the BDR, or the Egg as it's sometimes known, is certainly not a bad tank. ARL 44 is, for my money, the second best tier 6 heavy tank behind the KV-1S. And it's my favourite tier 6 heavy tank. And I might rebuy it one day. I think it's a brilliant all-round heavy tank. It's fantastic. One thing to note about it is that it has the best armour of any of the French heavy tanks until you get to tier 10. Now I am not talking about the best armour on a tier for tier basis. It has the best armour. Hull armour. Caveat, hull armour I am referring to. Although actually the turret armour is no worse. And in fact it's better than a lot of the tanks above it. And this is really the last true heavy tank on the French heavy line. The rest get into more of this sort of mobile, lightly armoured, but very destructive mindset with auto-loading guns and capable of doing a lot of damage. And so they don't really play like heavy tanks, they play more like medium tanks. And the AMX M4 45 finds itself in this awkward transitional stage between the two. They've stripped it of the armour of the ARL 44, but they haven't yet upgraded it with the firepower that you get on the AMX 5100. And the mobility is somewhere between the two. It really feels like it's taken the worst elements of a medium and a heavy tank, pushed them together into one mess, and voila, you have a machine. Alright, well, what's the grind on this like? Yeah, that was descriptive, wasn't it? So, engine-wise, you will have this second engine already unlocked on the ARL 44 if you've got any sense, so you won't have to use the stock engine. The top radio you will also have from the ARL 44. So basically your stock configuration will be this second engine, the top radio, and whichever of these two guns, the 90mm or the 105, whichever of those you want to use. From that point onwards, you are faced with a choice, I think. Oh no, I don't think you are. I think from that point onwards you need to get the suspension, which allows you to unlock the turret, which finally allows you to mount the gun, the DCA 45 that you probably unlocked at tier 6 on the ARL 44. And that can be a bit of a frustrating experience, I must admit. The grind through this, it's not the longest grind in the world. And the AMX 5100 is only 81,000 experience. I say only, you know, that's not a horrific amount. You can just steadily plod your way up to that quantity. So the grind on this thing isn't too painful. The most painful bit is that when you get the fully upgraded tank, it's really a bit of a letdown. I'm struggling to say something nice about this, so I'm not going to. It's a horrible, horrible, horrible machine. The oh, it will just let you down. You try and use the mobility and you realise the mobility isn't that good. You try and use the gun and you realise the gun is unreliable. It does not do close range firefights. It's really best at long range firefights, but then the accuracy and aim time of the gun will let you down. And I just end up finding this a very frustrating experience. There are people out there who like this tank, so you might be one of those. And if you are, all power to you. But I'm not. So let's just quickly talk about equipment and crew skills. Right, what equipment can you put on this? Well, I used a pauper setup, toolbox, camo net, binoculars because I'm poor and I didn't know if I was going to keep this or not. If I were going to keep it, what would I recommend? Well, your first priority should be getting that aim time down, and your second priority should be making it reload faster. You're not going to be able to improve the terrible gun, so you might as well improve the other things about this. Sorry, you can't improve the terrible armor, so you might as well try and improve the gun. Now, I do not believe this thing can fit a vertical stabilizer. No, it can't. So, the 3 bits of equipment I recommend are 1. Large caliber tank gun rammer. You need that DPM. You need it. 2. Enhanced gun laying drive. You want to have a better aim time on this gun. It's painful with the 2.9 seconds that it has. 3. Some people might say use optics. I disagree, because I just think you need to use improved vents to get the aiming time and the reload speed better. I think that's what you should be using. So I would say vents, gun rammer, and gun laying drive on this tank, if you're crazy and you want to keep it. As for crew skills, 6th Sense on the commander. You need 6th Sense on the commander, because if you are spotted, you become target priority number 1 for everybody, because you are so soft and squishy. Artillery has a field day shooting you. The armor's pathetic, and artillery will hit and will penetrate and will do full damage to you an awful lot of the time. I've been sitting there on 800-900 health and suddenly boom, dead because I was spotted. I wasn't as artillery safe as I thought I was, and an artillery decided to kill me. Please bear in mind that just comparing this with same tier artillery, they have the penetration to penetrate you, and they tend to do something of the order of 900 to 1200 damage in one shot, which can kill you in one shot, which can be a painful experience. So priority 1, 6th Sense. As for everything else, well, I would say safe storage is always a good idea to try and protect your ammo rack. Clutch breaking's not a terrible idea. Repairs is not a terrible idea, even though this doesn't play like a conventional heavy tank. I would, however, say snapshot to make it more accurate when you're turning the turret. And what's the driver one that's a similar thing? There's a driver skill that means that you are more accurate on the move. Smooth ride, that's the one. So I would say 6th Sense on the commander, snapshot on the gunner, smooth ride on the driver, either repairs or safe storage on the loader, and repairs on the radio operator. That would be my advice on this tank for crew skills. I think I've rambled on long enough about this thing. Let's just show you the armor, and then we'll have a couple of games, I guess. Just before I actually show you the armor, if you like this tank, and because this is, as you may have noticed, this is being a very negative review. I do not like this thing, and I can't recommend it. But if you do like this, and you think that I've been unfair to it in any way, please feel free to leave a comment in the the comment section to this video, and just tell me what you think is good about this tank, why you like it. On paper, it has good penetration, good gun depression, 10 degrees of gun depression to the front. So good gun depression, good penetration, and some mobility. In practice, in my experience, the gun bounces an awful lot, even with the good penetration. The gun depression is nice to have to the front, but your poor turret armor means that you still can't take the hits when hull down if they hit you, and your I've forgotten what I was going to say. Poor turret armor, yeah, and your aim time is just painful. It's mobile, but not that mobile. I just don't like it. Oh, and you've got good gun depression to the front, but your gun depression to the sides and rear sucks. look, enough of my rambling. Look, let's just go and have a look at the armor scheme and then have a look at some games, and hopefully you'll see the sort of thing I mean. So, time to have a quick look at the armor scheme on the AMX. Now, I would like to say that this is a good news, bad news situation, but I'd be lying. It's really more of a bad news situation. Let's start with the really obvious and bad bits. Rear armor. Yeah, what rear armor? 40mm with a bit of sloping, making it 41 on the back of the hull and 40 on the back of the turret. Side of the hull, we're also looking at 40. This means a couple of things actually. This firstly means that don't be surprised if people load high explosive and just go straight through your rear and side armor. I mean, if you look at the high explosive on this gun, it is you're looking at penetration values of around 45mm. So this tank can penetrate itself with its own high explosive from the rear and the sides. So that's something worth bearing in mind. Side of the turret, 70. Alright, fine, yeah, sure, whatever. Now, from the front, there are a few things to bear in mind here. Firstly, the roof of the turret is 40mm thick. Now, this means that, because of the angle, if you have a low caliber shell firing at you, there's a very good chance that if it hits here, it will bounce. But, if you are being shot at by a gun that is 120mm or greater in caliber, i.e. a 120mm shell or higher, and so we're thinking here in no small part of the Russian 122mm guns, they will completely overmatch the armour on the top of your turret and blitz straight through. The same is true if you try and angle it and they hit you in the side. Auto bounce angle, if it's 120mm or more, it's going to go straight through. So be very, very, very careful when angling this tank, because your side armour can be very susceptible to large caliber shells just going straight through it. So, hull armour, 90mm plus a bit of sloping makes it 130, 140 odd. If you can use the gun depression a bit and have them shooting from below you, then perhaps you can push that up towards 150mm. If you can get some angling going on round a corner, you might be able to push that to close to 200mm, but that's going to be very difficult to do without them just shooting you straight here, tracking you and penetrating you through the sides. You're realistically more looking at an angle like that, in which case you're looking at equivalent armour of 166mm, which is still not particularly good. So basically from the upper front plate you might bounce some lower tier like medium tanks or something, but don't expect it to hold up. Now, just in case the front of the hull was too impenetrable for you, the lower plate is a weak spot. It's only 70mm and it's got some angling, but it's going to be very, very difficult to make that armour really substantial. If you can angle the front of your tank, you can push that up to about 160, but anyone with a halfway decent gun is still going to punch their way through it. And just in case that wasn't enough for you, you see these two spots here, the machine gun port and this driver's hatch, I think it is. They are also weak spots. You'll notice the main hull is 90mm, this driver's hatch is 80mm, this machine gun port is 80mm, and they're not sloped. So these are basically 80-90mm of effective armour, and you can just blitz shots straight through there. What about the turret? Well, if we come around the sides, the very sides of the turret are an auto bounce angle for basically any gun. You know, you'd have to have a gun that's bigger than 210mm caliber in order to go through that, and that's just not going to happen. The front of your actual turret though, even though it's slightly rounded as you can see here, it's so thin that it only gets effective armour values of like 120 odd millimeters, which is not particularly good. The gun mantlet can possibly give you some bounces somewhere, but it's small and you really can't rely on it. And just in case that wasn't bad enough, there is of course a nice little commander's cupola here, which while technically not a weak spot, well, it's the same thickness as the front of the hull, the upper front plate, but the front of the turret is 100mm, so I guess technically that is a weak spot. But more to the point, I know it's a bit rounded, but people will still be able to reliably put shots through there, not that they're going to need to. In short, the armour on this tank is utter garbage. Yeah, I'm not going to waste any more of your time on it. The one thing I will note while we're still here, do remember you have 10 degrees of gun depression to the front, which is grand. You have bugger all gun depression to the sides and the rear. I think it might be 1 degree to the sides, and I can't remember what it is to the rear. Your side and rear gun depression is really poor, which can get very frustrating. One final thing to note, while this tank does not really have spaced armour per se, the tracks do count as spaced armour, and so if you have someone trying to put shots through the side of your tank, they can bump up the effective armour of the side here, although let's be honest, they're not particularly great spaced armour. If there was some angling going on, maybe they'll do something, but basically your tracks aren't going to eat that many shots. Maybe the odd shot here or there, but don't hold your breath. So, having lamented about the armour on this thing, should we have a quick look at 1 or 2 games? Yeah, why not? Here is game number 1, and unlike the way I usually do things, I've decided to show the game where you're bottom tier first. So the 2 best features about this tank are 10 degrees of frontal gun depression and 212mm of average penetration at tier 7, which is good. Which means that actually you're fairly well equipped to deal with tier 9 games, which is nice. And so I'm going to show you that first, and then we'll have the tier 7 game where you are top tier. So this is an assault game, we are defending. In fact, both of these games are going to be assault games on the same map, here on the Siegfried line. So we are defending, so 10 minutes just to hold the base. I think the other one's also a defense on this map. Just to hold the base and stay alive. Sounds easy, doesn't it? Yeah. So I'm going to go up to my regular spot, which is just over here, and try and use my gun depression to some effect. But, well, there's a Pershing over there, but this spot means that first you can get fire on anyone who wants to come across that ridge, but it also means you can get fire on someone trying to get into the town. And there we go, we put a shot into the Pershing. Tier 8 American medium there. And he seems to decide that discretion is the better part of valour. So, just going over to the other side in case that Comet decides to try anything funky. No, he doesn't seem too interested. So, T25/2 and AMX 1375. Can we get some shots on those guys? Well, there's the T25-2, and there's the AMX, and yes, that was a bounce on an AMX 1375, and that's the thing with this gun. The accuracy is not brilliant. The aim time's 2.9 seconds, which is really not fantastic. And so even with that 212mm of penetration, you can still get really frustrating bounces on the most stupid of targets. Just with, bad angles. The shot doesn't go quite where you wanted it to, hits at a bad angle, plinks off. That's just the way it is. Which can be very frustrating, because if your high penetration isn't doing you any good, well, a very big chunk of the reason why you would want to play this tank has just gone up in smoke. So far I've only done one damaging hit onto that Pershing. T25-2, that shot wasn't aimed at all, still went in and did damage. There you go. That's this gun for you. And I mean, that's a lot of guns for you in this game, but with the 8-odd second reload of this tank, it can be kind of frustrating. And there are times when you really wish you were driving anything else. Anyway, so we've lost a T21, they've lost a T25-2. Can I get some shots on people over on this side of the map? Well, there's nothing immediately obvious presenting itself. There's an IS-8 around there somewhere. And we've just lost our Indian Panzer to an AMX 1390, which are dangerous little blighters, they really are. There's the IS-8. His fronts to me. I don't bother aiming that shot, I just fire, because if I aim my shot, he'll aim his, and he will do a lot more damage to me than I will do to him, and that shot just hits a pillar. Wasn't very well aimed. So there's still that Pershing over there. The AMX has taken a bit of a battering, and so far I really haven't done a vast amount of damage, and we are losing 1-4 now. Hurrah! This is a great success. And we haven't lost any top tier tanks, which is good, but, you know, neither have they, which is bad. There we go, we claw one back by killing the Jagdtiger 88. Well, not me, but our team claws one back by killing the Jagdtiger 88. So there's the IS-8 still. And there's a Comet. Is he going to poke himself up? No, no shot on the Comet. IS-8 appears to be coming out, and I put a low damage roll, but I didn't aim it and it still went in, so whatever, we'll take it. Put a shot into the IS-8. IS-8 is now on 17 health. And this one I will aim. Even if he hits me, I should be able to take out a tier 9 heavy tank. Except I don't, someone else does, so fine, whatever. I took damage there, a lot of damage for no real benefit. There we go, AMX 1375, one shot into him. Now it'll probably take 2 more shots from me to kill him. Our team has pulled it back though to 7-5. Just checking that no one else is gonna get me if I poke out to try and kill this AMX, and I think I should be okay. Auto aiming on the AMX. There we go. 35 health on the AMX left, but I don't want to keep going because I think then I will get shot in the rear. And hopefully other people should be able to deal with him. Although our Jagdtiger is kind of getting shot up there, which is suboptimal. So Comet isn't looking too healthy, and there's an IS-6. Put a shot into the IS-6. And reload and see if we can put another shot into him. There we go, put some more pain into him. And the IS-8 has pretty good armour, but 212 penetration is enough to make him regret his life decisions. And there's a Comet as well, poking himself up. And we managed to put a shot straight through his turret and kill him. And we're winning 12-8. Now there's the E75, T30 and AMX 1375. Don't know where the AMX is. Someone is gesturing toward the town. Probably the E75, and I don't know where the T30 is. No, sorry, it was the T30 in the town and the E75. Okay, I just got spotted, so I do not want to get hit by either of those guys. They have big scary guns that makes a horrible, horrible mess of my tissue paper armour. And soft squishy innards. So I'm going to go and try and help these guys polish these two off, because I want some more damage and some more experience. See if I can get around the rear. Not that I really need to. Well, I do for the E75. Bounce on the T30. That's this gun for you. That you do sometimes wonder if the 212mm of penetration is actually worth it. The answer, in my opinion, is probably no. This Panther is determined to block my shot. It doesn't matter where I move to, he moves to be in between us. I could have killed him by now, but no, the Panther is determined that he's going to be in the way. And there we go, Jagdtiger kills the E75, and that just leaves the AMX 1375 somewhere. Sometimes your teammates are just so frustrating. And far more of a threat to you than they are to the enemy team, or than the enemy team are to you some of the time. So I could have had some damage and possibly a kill on the T30 and the E75 there, but RNG plus a teammate said no. It wasn't as if the Panther was even aiming his shots particularly well, because, you know, he achieved nothing other than block me. So I'm thinking the AMX might be up here, and I'm trying to use my supposedly good mobility to go up and do something about it. But remember that Panther who blocked my shots earlier on while achieving nothing? Well, he's faster than I am, and he's managed to get over there, and he's put the AMX on low health. Although he's taking a bit of a pasting from the AMX, but he kills him. So yeah, all praise the mighty bleeding Panther. Anyway, ended up getting top XP in that game, despite the fact that I didn't really appear to do a whole deal of much, but you know, we racked up a respectable amount of damage in the end, and as I say, got top XP. So, take a look at the results, and then we'll jump into game number 2, where we are top tier. Yay! Here we are with game number 2, and as I said before, we are now top tier, and this is once again an assault game on the Siegfried line, and we are defending. Still in the AMX. And again, I'm going to try and go up to the same region I usually try and go up to on a defense game on this map. You know, that sort of little divot between a couple of mounds at B8 or something like that, or is it C8? I can never remember the exact map location. I think it gives you a good amount of flexibility, and I like it. Here we go, just up here, and try and use my 10 degrees of gun depression to do something about these fellows. Now, the thing with top tier games in the AMX is that when you are top tier, your 212mm of penetration are basically meaningless. You do not need that to penetrate these guys. You can still bounce on them. You know, it's a waste of your time. And so one of the main selling points of this tank just evaporated. You are not that much more mobile than some of your tier 7 compatriots, things like the IS for example. And your only selling point then is 10 degrees of gun depression, which is also shared with the T29, and there you can see your horrible aim time means that that shot was a miss. And I take a lot of damage right there trying to get off this other shot. You could argue that I poked myself up a little bit too early, but there we go. Maybe that was a bit of a mistake. What can you do? See if I can pick up the kill on this tiger, which I can. But that was not because I aimed well, that was just pure luck. That's the problem with this gun, a lot of the time you end up relying on pure luck. There we go, some damage into the side of that IS. And really this tank doesn't like seeing tier 7 games because, as I say, your penetration is essentially a waste of time, your accuracy is not that good, your aim time sucks, and suddenly, you know, you want higher DPM in order to pull your weight in these sorts of games, and the AMX just doesn't have very good DPM or armour. And so, you know, you're left thinking that tier 7 games actually kind of suck. So, side of the Tiger P. You know, it wasn't completely aimed, but it was fairly close, still missed. And your 2.9 second aim time on this gun encourages you to take speculative shots that you wouldn't otherwise take, because you can't afford to take the return fire, you have poor armour. There we go, 240 into the side of him, and as a result you end up missing some shots, which can get very frustrating. And so you'll see in this game, you know, I've been firing basically as often as I could. Missed that shot. And we're currently losing 4-5. You know, we're not losing massively, it's fairly close. And I'm trying to get some shots on this Tiger P, but they're just not presenting themselves. And the enemy team is now very firmly in the town, which is bad. But there we go. So I'm going to move around here and see if I can get some shots on anyone. IS has made himself a potential target again. So I'm going to try and get some shots on him from a different direction, and same for the Tiger P. And you know, this is quite nice with the AMX. When you're on bad terrain, the engine power kicks in, and so, you know, you are fairly mobile on hilly terrain for a heavy tank. But I don't think that really makes up for its deficiencies. So we kill that Tiger P by putting a shot into his rear. Did we need 212mm of penetration to do that? No. Were the 10 degrees of gun depression useful? Yes, they were. Damage into the front of that IS. And we take him out. But, you know, you can see with our low DPM, we're not able to stop to prevent the fact that we're losing 7-10, and someone kills that artillery before we're able to get the shot in. So we are losing 8-10. 8-11. And there's a Tiger. Put a shot into him and pull back. And this is where the AMX likes to be, this sort of situation. And we actually take a bounce there, which is quite nice. I mean, normally when you go hull down in this, it's not to get bounces, it's so that you are exposing less of your tank to be shot. That one kind of hurt. Put another shot into the Tiger. Reasonable damage roll. and put a shot into the T-29. And we're still losing 8-11. And there's still more than 5 minutes of the match left, so it's not as if, you know, we can just time them out or something. And at this point, I probably should have chased down that T-29. I think that was a mistake not to. Managed to take out the Tiger. Bounce a shot there, which was rather lucky. And I'm worried about the T-29 reappearing in my flank. And there he is. As I say, I probably should have gone to try and kill him. Put a shot into the IS. T-29 finishes the IS off. Try and rearrange my tank such that I don't take damage from that T-29, but he just pulls off, which is not a stupid idea. And now it's just me and an IS left. T-29 damages my turret. The other T-29 puts a shot into me, and I die. And there we go. That's the problem with the AMX. Or that's, you know, your 212mm of penetration really don't help you in tier 7 games. And even, you know, they help you in higher tier games, great, but you can still bounce shots and miss shots, especially with the bad aim time and accuracy. And this IS, he doesn't even get a damaging hit on the T-29, so he's just gonna die, and there we go, we lose. And I ended up getting over 700 base XP on a loss there, and that was without a medal or anything to make it any better. One of the enemy T-29s played very well and actually took the high caliber from me there. So, despite the fact that I did more than 3,000 damage, it wasn't, you know, I think it was 3rd class mastery or something, only. We couldn't carry that game hard enough. Could we have done in any of the other tier 7 heavy tanks? Well, you could argue the point. We certainly wouldn't have been able to do what we did in that position. The combination of mobility and gun depression were good, but the lack of DPM and the lack of alpha damage really did let us down there. So I guess make of that what you will. Anyway, have a look at the post-game stats, and then we'll jump back into the garage for some quick concluding remarks. So in case you were unsure, what do I think about this tank overall? I think it's a bit rubbish. It's fragile, it's not particularly quick, the gun isn't particularly good. There's just nothing really to recommend this tank to you, I'm sorry. It's just not very good, which is a shame because, you know, the previous tank was good, and as far as I can work out, the AMX 5100 is very different, but still good. And so this really seems to be a bit of a damp squib in between two good tanks, which is a shame, but there we go. Oh well, what are you going to do? So, as soon as, well, you can see here, I have about another 16,000 XP to grind out with this tank. I'm not grinding it. I did consider grinding this tank properly. Well, when I say properly, I mean, you know, playing it a lot to grind through it as quickly as I could. But I tried that out, but I'm really not enjoying it, so I'm just playing it for the daily doubles. So, wait for the daily doubles, take my XP to the, I think it's 81,000 mark. Then I'll unlock the AMX 5100. Wait for there to be a special, like top of the tree or something. Pardon me. Sell the M4, transfer the crew to the 5100, retrain them for the 5100, and never look back. I'm not going to rebuy this tank, it's just not very good. Yeah, so I can't honestly recommend it to you. So, I hope you guys enjoyed that review, or possibly found it vaguely useful. If you did, please feel free to catch some of my other videos, and or subscribe to my channel, and please feel free to leave your own comments and thoughts about this tank in the comment section below. I mean, maybe you like this, maybe you think it's a good machine, and you can point out to me why you think it's good, and why you think I'm wrong, or why you think I've misjudged this machine, or whatever. So please feel free to leave some comments in the comment section. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, hope you found it vaguely useful, and I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao ciao.